Hello and welcome to my podcast. I'm Alden Carrow, author of Cornwall In Verse, To Tor in poetry. This show is about slowing down, listening closely, and discovering the poetry that lives in both the extraordinary and the everyday. Each episode, I begin with a guest poem, something from the wider world of poetry that has inspired me or continues to resonate. Then I'll invite you, the listeners, to suggest future guest poems, and after that, I'll share one of my own pieces too. Today, we are turning our attention to the grandest stage of all. We often think of poetry as a human endeavour, a way for us to capture the world in words. But what happens when we flip that perspective? What happens when we acknowledge that nature was the first poet, the first performer, and certainly the first stage builder? The theme for this episode is nature as performer and stage. It's about the environment, not just as a passive backdrop for our human dramas, but as an active, breathing protagonist. A force that recites its own verses through the wind, the tides, and the slow geological shifting of the earth. To explore this, I knew we had to go back to one of the true masters of nature poetry, a voice from the American Transcendentalist movement who saw the divine spark in every leaf and stone. I've chosen Song of Nature by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson didn't just look at nature, he listened to it. He believed that the natural world was a direct conduit to the spiritual, a visible manifestation of invisible truths. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote Song of Nature in a time when the industrial world was just beginning to drown out the quieter rhythms of the earth. Yet his words have startling relevance today. In this poem, Emerson gives a voice to nature herself. It's not a human describing a landscape, it's the landscape describing its own history, its own creative process, and its own patient, sometimes ruthless endurance. The poem is sweeping in its scope. It moves from the primeval creation of the earth, through the chaotic churning of elements to the emergence of life itself. It feels like a time-lapse video, in verse, watching mountains rise and fall, oceans fill and retreat. As I read this, I want you to close your eyes and imagine the voice, not as a human voice, but as a sound that resonates from the bedrock, a voice that is as old as the granite and as fluid as the sea. This is nature, boasting of her creations, lamenting her incomplete works, and declaring her eternal presence. It's a long, meditative piece, so let yourself drift along the current of the stanzas. Here is Song of Nature by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Mine are the night and morning, the pits of air, the gulf of space, the sportive sun, the gibbous moon, the innumerable days. I hid in the solar glory, I am dumb in the pealing song. I rest on the pitch of the torrent, in slumber I am strong. No numbers have counted my tallies, no tribes my house can fill. I sit by the spinning fount of life, and pour the deluge still, and ever by delicate powers, gathering along the centuries, from race on race the rarest flowers. My wreath shall nothing miss, and many a thousand summers my gardens ripen well, and light from meliorating stars with firmer glory fell. I wrote the past in characters, of rock and fire the scroll, the genesis of the atom, the measure of the soul, the miles of starlit waters that sleep, which is the glass, in which I dream that my works are full, that time is autumn grass. I travel in pain for him, my creature is not yet. He unmakes himself with heavy words, he is afraid to sit. But I, with my secret, and the stars in their courses, and the river in its bed, and fire in the stone, will wait for the man to be born. There's a profound, almost overwhelming sense of scale in Emerson's work here. When we talk about nature as a performer, Emerson takes it literally. The speaker, nature personified, claims ownership over the night and morning, the pits of air and the gulf of space. This isn't a passive setting, it's a dynamic, powerful entity that is strong even in slumber. What strikes me most deeply is the stanza, "I wrote the past in characters of rock and fire the scroll." Here the earth is the writer. The geological layers, the strata of rock, the fossils trapped in limestone. These are the verses of nature's own poem. We're merely reading a manuscript that was begun billions of years before we arrived. It humbles the human poet. It suggests that our ink and paper are just fleeting imitations of the true record, which is written in rock and fire. Furthermore, consider the patience in this poem. Nature is willing to wait. I travel in pain for him, my creature is not yet. Emerson suggests that humanity is perhaps not the final draft, or at least we are still a work in progress in the eyes of the earth. We are afraid to sit, afraid to be still, while nature possesses the ultimate patience of the stars and the river. In the context of our theme, the stage here is the entire cosmos, and the performance is the slow, agonizing, beautiful evolution of life itself. It reminds us that to be a poet of place, one must adopt a different kind of time, geological time. We must learn to see the landscape, not just as it is today, but as a moving, breathing process that has been performing its own drama long before we bought a ticket to watch. Moving on from the cosmic scale of Emerson, I want to take us to a very specific, tangible place where the idea of nature as stage is quite literal. On the coast of Cornwall, near Land's End, there is a place called the Minack Theatre. For those who haven't been, it's an open-air theatre carved directly into the granite cliff face overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It was the brainchild of a remarkable woman called Rowena Cade, who, with her gardener, moved tons of earth and stone by hand to create it. It's a place where Shakespeare is performed while dolphins swim in the backdrop. It's the perfect embodiment of our theme today, a collaboration between human creativity and the raw, unyielding power of the landscape. My poem, Minack Theatre, attempts to capture the feeling of sitting in those stone seats, watching a play, but realizing the real performance is the ocean itself. When you visit the Minack, you are struck immediately by the vertigo of it. You're perched on the edge of the world. The stage is set low, backed by the panoramic horizon of the sea. As an audience member, you're at the mercy of the elements. If it rains, you get wet. If the wind blows, the actors must shout. There's no roof, no walls, only the sky. I wrote this poem after a visit a few years ago. I was fascinated by how the boundaries blurred. The actors were performing, yes, but the waves crashing against the rocks below were providing the percussion. The gulls wheeling overhead were unscripted extras. It felt as though the theatre wasn't imposed upon the cliff, but rather grew out of it. This poem is a tribute to that synthesis of art and nature, and to the enduring spirit of the rock that holds it all together. So here is Minack Theatre. On granite steps the ocean sings, its voice the tide, its hands the wings. Below the stage, in sunlight set, plays host to surf's own cast and net. Each seat holds sky in cobalt hue, the waves applaud, the breezes cue. Actors and gulls in chorus blend, as cliff and cloud their presence lend. By night the moon becomes a lamp, The rock a hole, the sea a camp. The air grows thick with salt and rhyme, and time slows down to meet the time. Here stories breathe in ocean's breath, defying weather, stone and death. Minack remains both wild and true, a theatre born of sea-carved view. In this piece, I wanted to focus on the sensory confusion, in the best possible way, that happens at the Minack. The first stanza, on granite steps, the ocean sings, immediately gives the agency of the performance to the water. The ocean has a voice, the tide provides the rhythm. The human actors, though present, are sharing the billing with the surf. I use the image, each seat holds sky in cobalt hue, to emphasize the openness of the space. Usually, a theatre seat holds a person, or perhaps velvet and stuffing. Here the seats are made of earth and stone. When empty, they hold nothing but the reflection of the sky. They are containers for the atmosphere. I also wanted to touch on the temporal aspect, much like Emerson did. Time slows down to meet the time. There's clock time, the time of the play, the 2 hours of traffic on the stage, and then there's tide time or stone time. At the Minack, you're forced to reconcile these two. You're watching a story that might span a few days or years within the plot, while sitting on rock that has witnessed millions of years of erosion. The line, "the moon becomes a lamp," is a nod to the fact that before electricity, nature provided our lighting, and at the Minack it still plays a crucial role. A play performed under full moon there is fundamentally different experience than one performed under heavy cloud cover. The environment dictates the mood. The theatre is born of sea-carved view. It's a child of the landscape, not an invader. It reminds us that our best creations are often those that work with nature and not against it. And now we're going to shift gears from the granite cliffs of Cornwall to the digital cliffs of the internet. I want to talk about the practical side of being a poet in the modern world, focusing on using X, formerly known as Twitter, to promote poetry books and connect with the writing community. It might seem jarring to move from Emerson's starlit waters to hashtags and algorithms, but this is the reality of the creative life today. We must be both dreamers in the woods and marketeers in the town square, too. For a long time, I was resistant to Twitter. It felt noisy, aggressive, and the complete opposite to the slow, contemplative nature of poetry. How can you discuss the nuances of a sonnet in 280 characters? But as I began to explore it, I realised that the platform has a unique relationship with brevity that actually suits poetry quite well. The writing community on X is vast, vocal, and surprisingly supportive. So how do we use it effectively without losing our souls or our writing time? First, we have to reframe the platform. Don't think of it as a billboard where you shout, "Buy my book." Think of it as a cocktail party or a literary salon. If you walked into a party and just shouted, "Buy my book" at everyone's face, you'd be asked to leave. The same applies to X too. The key is engagement, not broadcasting. It's about building relationships. When I released North Yorkshire In Verse, To Tor in poetry, I didn't just post links, I shared the process. I shared the view from the window while I was editing. I shared the snippets of poems that didn't make the cut. People love to see the scaffolding. They want to know the poet behind the poem. Let's talk about the mechanics. The hashtag writing community is the town square. Using it connects you to thousands of other writers who are in the same boat. But use it wisely. Engage with others who use it. Reply to their posts. Celebrate their acceptances. Generosity is the best currency on social media. If you're generous with your time and support for other poets, they will eventually return the favour. Another great tactic for poets on X is the micro-poem or the visual poem. The platform is visual. Taking a beautiful photo of your book in a natural setting, perhaps resting on a mossy rock or a piece of driftwood, tying back to our theme, stops the scroll. People are visual creatures. A block of text might be skipped, but an evocative image of a page of poetry caught in the golden hour sunlight draws the eye. Quote tweets are also powerful. Instead of just retweeting a literary journal's call for submissions, quote tweet it and add your own encouragement or experience with that journal. It does add value. However, we must address the elephant in the room, the algorithm and mental health. It's easy to get addicted to the dopamine hit of a like. It's easy to equate the number of retweets with the quality of your work. This is a dangerous trap. Emerson would tell us that the value of the work is in the work itself, not the applause. You must set boundaries. Maybe you only check the app for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening. Maybe you take weekends off. You're a poet first, a content creator second, third or fourth. If the noise of the platform starts to drown out your inner voice, step away. The granite cliffs aren't going anywhere, and neither is your poetry. Finally, use X to demystify the publishing process. Share your rejections. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but sharing that you got a no from a magazine humanises you. It makes you relatable. It shows that rejection is part of the work. When you eventually get a yes, the victory is sweeter for your followers because they saw the struggle. Promotion is really just storytelling. You're telling the story of your life as a writer. Your book is just one chapter in that story. So if you're hesitant about using X, try to see it as a stage, a digital stage, where you can perform small acts of connection. Just remember to step off the stage and go back to the sea, back to the woods, back to the source of the poetry itself. So now you've listened to one of my poems and the benefit of using X to promote books, I'd love to hear from you. If there's a poem you'd like me to feature as a guest poem in a future episode, please email me at aldencarrow78@gmail.com. That's aldencarrow78@gmail.com. It could be a classic, something modern, or even a personal favourite that means a lot to you. This way, the podcast becomes a shared journey. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, may you find the poetry in the everyday, and I look forward to speaking to you again on Wednesday.